right, guys, we are going to have a debate today. We know how much Mark hates to uh, be opinionated about a certain player. Let's be honest, mate. Any debating background from your schooling years, mate?
No, I think if there had have been some sort of a debate team or something, I would have been on it for sure. I started a law degree because I wanted to argue with people for a living before I realized all the paperwork and reading that was associated and left.
Right.
So
That's fair. Well, today, guys, something a bit different. We're going to go through about 20 players here. Each person I'm going to take the positive, then I'll take the negative on the next player, and we're just going to go back and forth at that. Really, the goal of this is to provide as much clarity for you as possible. We're really going to delve into each part, obviously the positive and the negative, and you can make your decisions on each one. Some of these players we're both going to have in our team, but we're just going to show you the positive and the negative on both of them there. So I'm going to kick it off with the positive on Payne Haas. So he's very, very highly owned at 45%. It's absolutely crazy, I think. Compared to last year, he was actually a much lower ownership and was so much cheaper. So yeah, anyway, we'll get into on the positive side of things. Really, what you want to be looking at with Payne Haas is his first 6 or 7 games. Anything really before Origin is absolutely massive scoring for Payne Haas. You look at last year, and his lowest score was a 62 in that first seven matchups. And then you go back to our 2022 stats as well. And that was the year he did end up getting injured through this middle part here, sort of from round 8 onwards there. You can see he missed round 9. He had a couple of 40s in there, but he started with an absolute bang, again, hitting 58 as his lowest score across that time. So really with Payne Haas, you know you're getting consistency each and every week. The low scores aren't really there for him. It's only usually post-Origin or it is injuries for Payne Haas that ends up giving you some problems. And therefore, he is a terrific person to start in your round 1 team, because we know how important last year was just actually locking in those points when you're spending up, rather than myself with a Scotty Drinkwater or someone like that who managed to stink it up in those first few games last season. Marky, take it away on the negatives for Payne Haas.
yeah, a good start actually for me because I actually do feel negatively about Payne Haas. So I'll actually be saying my actual opinion on this. So we discussed it in the Broncos pod, which we just released. Payne Haas actually had a career low in minutes last year, and it seems pretty clear that Kevy Walters is sort of trying to limit him to about that 60-minute mark rather than pushing him. Obviously, you can see those first couple of games there. He played 65, but I think there maybe was a player out. Anyway, what we saw from Haas last year was sort of base stats were sort of in and around what they were previously, but the attacking stats were just massively inflated. So he had his lowest minutes of his career on average, but his highest attacking output ever. Even though he had sort of it wasn't like a try spike inflation either. It was just tackle bust and offloads. And a lot of it was, him running a little bit wider, and also the Broncos performing really, really well. Obviously, they made the grand final and should have won it if they hadn't choked. So, in my opinion, I think the Broncos maybe are due for a little bit of regression back to sort of the bottom of the top 8, or I've got a bet that they missed the finals completely. So obviously with that, sees Payne Haas go back to normal, which is, I mean, he's awesome, but it's a 1 or around about 1 ppm instead of 1.1 ppm, which is what he was last year, and he goes back to a 60 average and makes him 4 points overpriced.
Yeah, I can completely agree with a bunch of that stuff. I suppose, yeah, the big positive is just those starts over the last few years. And if you're looking to trade him around Origin anyway, then it could be a no-brainer. But I do see both sides personally myself. Okay, moving on to Jamal Fogarty. You can go with the positive side to Jamal first. But before, I have a little bone to pick with you on Jamal.
Mm-hmm.
Given you were the biggest advocate for him about a month ago, and then on the pod the other day, you're telling me that he hasn't been in your team for a good while now.
No, I don't think so. No, he's definitely in my team.
All
Yeah,
right. We'll get the boys to go back and check that recent pod,
maybe.
one of the last 3,
Okay,
I think it
yeah.
was, that said he hasn't been
I
in your team for a few weeks. So anyway,
No,
give me
maybe
some
that was somebody
positives.
else. I don't know. Yeah, I definitely had a bit of I definitely wavered on him for a little bit there though, but he's sort of been in and around. I was sort of flipping with the idea of maybe pushing him up to Moses or something like that. And I
Okay.
actually went back and reread my own article and reminded myself about all the reasons why I like him. So,
Okay. Yeah, that's what you were saying.
pretty simply, I had a bit of a look at what teams with strong dominant kickers look like in terms of their distribution. And I mean, Panthers, Sharks, Warriors, and Broncos all sort of have teams with one sort of dominant kicker, and they're coincidentally all top 8 teams last year. So, I mean, I think maybe there's some science to that in terms of a clear direction. I think it sounds to me like that's the way they're moving with Fogarty. Obviously, KO Weeks seems to be the favorite in the 6, and Chevy Stewart in the 1. Neither of them have a noted kicking game. Obviously, we'd still be predicting 100 meters or so for whoever is in the spine. The hookers don't kick at all. So really, I'm sort of expecting Fogarty to do sort of 85 to 90% of the kicking, not 100% or somewhere like that. So I looked at how many kick meters there were on average, and I sort of see. I'm not giving him a huge bump, only 2.5 to 3 points in kick meters. We're talking about 60, 90 meters a game type of thing. Nothing sort of over the top. And then obviously he picks up the goal kicking with the retirement of Croker, so that's another 6 points. So you're just looking at a really nice discount there. So just 2 or 3 points in play kicking, 6 points in goal kicking, and you're at a mid-50s average.
Did you see much on with those guys that became that really big dominant playmaker? Did they pick up any sort of attacking stats on that?
Yeah, there was actually. I had a bit of a look at just Sean Johnson as a comparison. He ran for an extra 10 meters a game and a half a tackle bust or something like that.
Yeah.
I think it just, it's a function of having your hands on the ball. You have a little bit more base,
Mhm.
and you're in and around the ball. You're likely to pick up more try assists. But I know Sean Johnson. Obviously, you might be thinking, well, Sean Johnson is a completely different player to Jamal Fogarty. But if you have a look at Sean Johnson's 2022 stats,
Mm.
Fogarty actually had more run meters, more tackle busts, and a very similar try scoring and try assist rate to what Johnson did in 2022. So they're not different at all in terms of the numbers, although the eye test wise they are.
Yeah, probably the biggest thing with that is that Johnson and his team became incredible, whereas it's probably hard to see the Raiders doing the same. That'd be where I'd see a negative on
Yeah,
it.
I mean, I mean, we were talking last year about how we thought the Warriors were going to get the spoon. So,
Yeah.
if you look at the Raiders, they've got a lot of similarities to the Warriors last year. Big forward pack, lots of good depth in the forward as well. Guys can play, off the back, and maybe the direction will help.
Yeah, it is. There's definitely a lot of similarities. My only main other issue with Jamal is he's someone I've had over the years too, but it's just the lowest scores that he had throughout the year. Like there's a 20 in there, there's a couple of high 20s, a bunch of 30s as well, which obviously the more top guys don't have as much. He's probably a little bit more on having the lowest score side than even like a Moses, obviously, who is a much higher scorer. But we see Moses as a fairly volatile type of guy, and probably just to be aware of that with Fogs, that he will likely have. Let's just say he does have that bump in base. He'll still have probably those low 30s games when this things aren't happening for the Raiders. So are you able to stomach that? I suppose is the big thing as an owner of Fogs. If he does come out with a couple of 30s, or let's say a 38 and a 40, like he did, last year, can you stomach that this year? Alrighty, Brandon Smith. He's a fun one. I'm kind of warming to him a little bit more. I've been kind of keeping my head away from him, to be honest with you, on this one with Brandon. But I suppose the positives for him is we did see when he was a little bit more fit last year. And when he's fit in general, he does seem to score very, very well in sort of that 60-odd minute role, which for Brandon, that's all we should be expecting from him. Because when he dominated for the Storm, that's what he was playing. Like he'd have highs of sort of the 70-minute mark. You see 3 there back in 2022 and the start of 2021 there. And even games at the back end of last year when he did well, it was sort of 72, 67. even some of the sort of low 60s games is where he has scored a right to a 68 there in 48 and 68 minutes there. So, and that was when he wasn't fit at all. So he's definitely one of those guys that doesn't need the full 80 minutes that a lot of other hookers do because of the attacking stats and the like that he can provide. People are saying that, Connor Watson is going to take a chunk of his minutes. Does Radley play the full 80 this year? Does, Watson take a few of those 13 minutes and maybe sort of, 15 or something like that at 9? And if that's the case, it is 15 at 9, then Smithy is still going to be a very good buy, with really not too much downside, and only real upside there up towards that 10 points or so with the duel.
Yeah, I find Brandon Smith really hard. I was really lukewarm on him last year, and we ended up all just jumping on because everybody else was on. And one of our sort of game theory principles is around, not swerving away from high ownership sort of players. But just looking at last year, even if you take out the 2 sub 40-minute games, his average is only 43 in 63 minutes. And, they had Drew Hutchinson. They're doing a little bit of hooker and Sandon Smith and a few other sort of guys, whereas Connor Watson is a Riggy-Didge guy who can play hooker. So I guess my concern is I even if Radley only plays like 60 minutes a game, the Roosters have so many forwards. They really don't need Brandon Smith to be going 80. My other concern with Brandon Smith is in the past where he's been really good, a lot of it's been the try scoring rate. So if you have a look, it was 15, 20, 50, and 15 across 2019 to 2022 percentage wise. And then he was down at like 10% last year. And I think that's kind of reflective of the NRL sort of playing more towards the sidelines than in the middle of the field. So I guess my concern is he's could be a 43, 44 average in 65 minutes rather than a 47 to 50. And I mean, he's priced at 37 or something like that. So
39,
it might just be a bit
even
lower.
higher. So
30, there you go.
Yeah.
So yeah, it could be that you're only getting sort of 5 points of value, and I think we can do better.
Yeah, for sure. All right, moving along to Ruben Cotter there. Go away with some positives for him.
Yeah, obviously, I love Ruben. I'm a Cowboys fan, if you don't know that.
Bunch of Cowboys boys.
Yeah, obviously the big concern for Ruben is his points per minute fluctuates pretty aggressively. If you look at the sort of, there's a bit of a blend over the last 3 years. His PPM sort of ranged from 0.8 to 1. But I think a lot of that is, Ruben goes as the Cowboys go. And I think maybe there was a bit of reading their own headlines last year in the off season. And it seems like they're back to work now. And I'm really expecting big things from Ruben this year with, taking on the shared captaincy. I think there's a pretty consistent 60-ish minute role there for him and an average of about 50. So he's been in my team for a while. I don't foresee me taking him out.
Definitely. Yeah, and he's just one of the, as he said, the PPM is a big mover. Also, the minutes are a big mover as well. And I suppose the big thing to take out of that with Todd Payton was just, he said they're about 3 weeks ahead of where they were last season, which is only really a good sign for him. I suppose the main issue with Cotter is you do need him to get a sort of at least to that 50 mark. Otherwise, it's kind of like, it's okay as a starter. Look, most of these guys, you want them to at least make some money, but someone here that you are likely going to have to trade out by the time Origin comes, and if he's only made you sort of that 40 or 50K, or he does come out and has a bit of a struggler, you see he started with a 60, which was great, but there was 41, 38, and 42. And with those 4 scores, even with that 60 in there, he's not moving at all. So, he can have the higher ones, he can have the lower ones. And again, do you have the stomach to be able to cop some of those lower scores as well? The other big thing here is their draw. It's actually fairly solid. It's not as pretty as last year, but let's just say they do come out and start really well. You can imagine the likes of Drinkwater and a lot of the outside backs to be getting a few more points, and then be a little bit less in the base stats through there. So yeah, a little bit of a narrative there, but it could go either way for sure with Ruben. Let's move to Raymond Faitala Mariner. I actually want to give you the positive side for this because I did hear about the bet with with Eddie from In the Bin,
Yep.
which is pretty funny. And I'm not as bullish as you. I'm a little bit more in the middle / to the other side, just because we need to see it. But go ahead, son.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, this is all contingent on him winning that second row spot, and there is some noises coming out of the Dragons about Dylan Egan, I think it is, who's a young guy there that Flano's been talking up, although that could just be, coach speak. I think that for me, you don't just go out and sign a player like, they're obviously looking for specific things, and the left edge back row seems to be one that's pretty obviously needing an upgrade. Obviously, they played Dan Russell there at times last year, Jack Bird, and I think that they just went to go and get Faitala Mariner. Obviously, he in the past has been a really strong PPM player on the edge. If you look at his career, where he plays at least 50 minutes, up until the point where he did his foot in 2021, he was sort of a fringe keeper level scorer. 2016 it was 49 average, 2017 48 average, 2018 50, 2019 50, and 2020 52. So I mean, he was great, and then obviously did his foot pretty poor in 2022 and 23 across 12 games. It's sort of, ho-hum 40-ish. But I've got a really, good feeling that, a change of scenery is going to be good. And Flano seems like a coach that can get something out of him. And he'll be, looking to sort of, get through that work in the Dragons. And yeah, I see a mid to high 40s, low 50s average player there. And with the mid duel, he's, he seems like a fill up if he's on the edge.
Yeah. Marky's bet was that he has to go over 50. So,
Oh,
that's his
it's not
hope.
quite.
Anyway.
It's 600. It's 650K. I don't think it's quite 50.
50?
I think
Okay.
it's probably like
47?
47 or
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Okay. Well, that's awesome. A 31 break even. That would be an absolute slam dunk with the dual position. Okay. On the negative side, 2020 was a long time ago. That's coming into almost 4 seasons ago now. So plenty of positives from back there. 2022, also solid. He makes enough money for sure in that one. But yes, that's a long time ago. And the second one there, you got Dan Russell. You've got Tom Eisenhuth, who is also obviously a good player. He's played with the Storm. He's done a great job. And then there's a lot of talk about Ryan Couchman as well. And that's 4 guys fighting for one spot. So I suppose for Raymond, is he going to be getting closer to that 80 minutes, or is that going to be closer to a 60? And, with his issues coming off that foot injury and getting a bit older as well, like, we're talking back to stats from all the way back to 2015 when he first started. So almost a 10-year vet now. Does he play those massive minutes? Is it down to a 60? Is he the same player? Are any of those other guys going to try and take his spot? And again, this is all contingent on him getting that start. But if he does, I can see positives and negatives either way. Alrighty, let's go to Kyle Flanagan. So very interesting one there at 349K. The break even at 25. There's definitely plenty of interest from a lot of coaches there. 18% currently own him, and he is going to be getting that starting 5'8" spot with the Dragons. And there's been a fair bit of talk from his dad. Obviously, that is a helpful one at that, of him looking to take a little bit more control of this team. And what does that mean exactly? That means we don't know. But it could be that he takes a little bit more of the kicks in general play, which you see across a bunch of his games there at halfback, is that he hasn't been a massive kicker of the footy, and he still has some really solid scoring there. So we'll scroll right down. There's plenty of games there at halfback now, and that's a 42 average. But again, we're looking at sort of 2020 and 2021 numbers in there a lot. We take that even to 2022, and that is at a 32, which is 7 points there. And with a kick meter tally of 77 is very, very low. So if that's the case and he's taking a little bit more control of this team, then he could definitely go well above the 100 kick meter mark. I wouldn't think it'd be anything above 180 to 200, but that's still 3 or so points of value. And then in 2023, that was a 33 number there at halfback, which again is 8 points of value. And that was up more at 120 kick meters there. We look at 5'8", we need 2. He's a 33 there in one game last season. And then 2022, he didn't play in that 5'8" spot. But again, you wouldn't expect it to be too drastically different playing at 6 or 7 for his role anyway, given that his kick meters were fairly low. So pretty safe guy. His base stats are pretty solid defensively. And that's exactly what you want to be looking at. Can he get some kick meters? Can he get some base with his defense? And then the odd, try assists and the like there, which he only has one in 2023 last year. So you'd imagine a little bump on that, which will be helpful for his fantasy stocks. On the negative side, Matt.
Yeah, Flanagan's one. I'm really hoping that I actually don't have to get him. And just a couple of things. Obviously, in this, the goal kicking is going to be really important. Whether he gets the goal kicking or whether it's Lomax. Obviously, Lomax in the past has been a pretty poor goal kicker, but definitely ramped it up. He's actually improved his goal kicking percentage 4 years in a row. In terms of what he gets, I think he was in the low 80s last year, which is pretty impressive. So, down up from like 60 something in his sort of first year when he's kicking. So, if it is that Lomax is still the goal kicker, I think there's a very real possibility that we're looking at a low 30s rather than a mid 30s. If you look at all the half games combined over the last 2 years, it's an average of 32.3, but that's with 0.8 in goal kicking. So it makes it 31.5, which, he's priced at 25. So that's kind of only 6.5 points. And that's not a cash cow. He's nowhere near a keeper, obviously. And you can't start him on a weekly basis. And he's in the 300s. So, you want to, if anyone is in your emergencies, you really want them to be 200 and something. You certainly don't want to be paying 300 and something for a guy that you never want to put in your scoring 17. Obviously, if he kicks the goals, it's completely different. The other part of it, as you sort of point out, is the kick meters. That averages with only 90 odd kick meters. So if we push that up to 150 or 200, you're looking at 3 or 4 extra points, and he might squeeze there. But I mean, the other point to keep in mind is the Dragons are pretty comfortable wooden spoon favorites as well. Maybe there's some missed tackles there. He's not, playing in a system that is, depending on which edgeback rowers were there, it might be a rookie edgeback rower next to him. And also there's going to be the pressure that if the Dragons are losing, which we anticipate they will, is there going to be questions being asked about nepotism and whatever, and maybe they look to change it up with another player in the halves. So they obviously were shopping for another half because they tried to buy Ronald Volkman. So yeah, there's a job security, floor, ceiling, concerns across the park, and I'm gonna not have him if he's not goal kicking.
There you go. Simple as that. And yeah, the move from Dogs to Dragons probably doesn't help him too much, does it? No real improvement. Cam Murray in this one. So you'll jump on again on the positive side for Cam, please, Mark.
Yep. So I guess on the positive side, it sounds like they're trying to find ways to keep Murray on the park. So obviously there's been some comments. There was some sort of mail floating around that that Tallis Duncan was going to be playing on an edge this year, but we've got it on good authority that that's not the case. And he's actually hasn't trained one day on the edge, and he's just been playing in the middle. And Demetrio came out with a comment that was something to the effect of, we're really happy with Tallis Duncan's development because it allows us to put Cam Murray out to the edge to have a rest every now and then, which in my mind, I hear that and I hear we want to keep Murray on the park as long as possible.
Yep.
So obviously, Murray and Haas had done a bit of a switcheroo this year where we were really hot on Cam Murray coming off that monster season last year, and Haas exploded and Murray sort of actually started really, really well. So Murray was only 1 point on average behind Nathan Cleary in the opening 4 or 5 rounds. So they sort of went together, and then Cleary obviously exploded, and everybody that had him was happy, and everyone that didn't have him was not happy. So Yeah, I think for me this year, if Murray's going to be playing at least 60 minutes a game, you look at his average from last year where he had a poor season. It's 62.7, and the Rabbitohs didn't make the 8. So, if you see there's maybe there's an extra try or two in there or a try assist line break. I remember in 2022 when the Rabbitohs, or was it 21, they were really good. 2021 maybe they
21.
were really
Yep.
good. He was, busting the line for fun, scoring lots of tries. He was kind of busy. So, yeah, maybe we see some more attacking, but, I see a 60 plus average player there priced at 57, a perfect vice captaincy option for those that aren't buying Payne Haas. And I don't think he's got to buy. Oh, he's got to buy in round 7 or somewhere in there, I think.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, obviously that is one thing on the Haas side, but yeah, I'm a big fan of Murray this year. For me, it's really hard to put both him and Totola in. So that's kind of the only thing that's really stopping me from just locking him into my team.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, that buy in round 7, obviously in 13, you'd be looking to trade him out as well, given they have that buy in 17 there as well. So he's going to miss 13, 16, 17, and 7 in that first bit. So yeah, you're getting a guy that misses round 7. Yeah, Totola's the other issue as well. And then yeah, you're looking to trade him out likely anyway from that point. That's probably my biggest negative on him. And again, if there's some smoke and mirrors on that talk of like him just moving to the edge as getting a rest like that, maybe it's still 70 minutes that he's playing, given he still averaged 68. Was it 70? Whatever. Let me take that away. Total minutes last year were 68, and that included a 32-minute game there as well. So not much room to grow on minutes wise. And does that mean that he goes 50 minutes or 55, 60 in the middle and then moves to the edge for a little bit? And that takes away from some of his base. That could be a negative. It obviously could be a positive as well. Another big thing to note where there was his increase in negative stats. So he's a 1.1 penalty per game last year and a 0.6 on the errors, which you go back to 2022, he was 0.4 penalty, 0.5 error, and very similar to that. Even lower on the penalties, 0.3 and a 0.6 in the error count as well there. So does that stay in his game if the Rabbitohs continue to not play too well, obviously, or does that actually turn around and help his score? It is hard to take a negative stance on Murray, but that is the things you have to think of for him there. All right. Oh, I'm going to steal your thunder here on the positive side for Penisini, mate, at 582. We know that you've got plenty to like about him. I will be actually interested to hear your negatives because I didn't hear any in your podcast. So 582K for Will. He was in my team last year and he did help me out a fair bit. So I have plenty to like on him. It is obviously that back end of the year where it was a little bit lower for him. And that did coincide with Mitch Moses not being there and the Eels going on a decent slide. So that I can see as a bit of a positive, given that Moses is going to be there, Dylan Brown's going to be there, and they should be good across both sides of the park. We saw last year when Brown was there at the beginning of the year, it did not affect his scoring. So don't worry about that side of it. With that left side being super strong, they still had Dylan Brown and a really good left edge. Anyway, what you're looking for with Penisini is the consistency. His lowest score over that first, 15 games there was a 32 in round 2 there, and that only involved one bit of attacking stat with a line break assist. So if that's the floor for a keeper level center, for a guy you're going to be getting playing in round 13, 14, 17, and 19, it does seem like a bit of a slam dunk if the center position is terrible.
Yeah, this is a really hard negative side
Sorry,
for
mate.
me. Yeah. If I was gonna try to point to a negative, I'd suggest it would lie in the idea of not taking players who have just done the career best version of something as being, something that's prescriptive. So, I mean, if you look at Penisini over the 2021 and 2022, obviously, you look at the base stats, it was 27 and then 27 and a half, and then it jumped up to 29 and a half last year. maybe we, see him go back to, a couple of points off the base. I assume that's probably run meters. We saw a big shift last year in terms of the centers on average. I did some calculations on most like sort of fantasy relevant centers, and every single one of them had higher run meters and tackle busts from the years prior. And I think that was just reflective of the ball going to the edge more and coaches asking centers to do some more work. But for me, I think Sean Lane could actually take away a little bit from Penisini. Obviously, they've got a more an extra weapon in the team that can be relied on. I don't know if you remember the Dylan Brown, Sean Lane left edge experience from 2022. And the Eels seemed to go right a lot last year, and it was Penisini sort of getting around somebody on the outside and running down the sideline. And I wonder if maybe it's sort of the attack balances up a little bit. And obviously Bailey Simonson was really, really good in the centers last year if they decide to go that way, or Morgan Harper as well, who's an experienced campaigner, where, they were obviously running around with Walker Blake or, some other doofus there last year. So, Matt Dory played heaps there. He didn't do anything. So of course Penisini was getting more balls. So I think if I was going to make an argument against Penisini, it would be the idea that maybe he had sort of an outlier season in terms of attacking output and base stats due to the pieces that were around him.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's move along to Reedy. If you can go the positive side on Mr. Reed Mahoney with the doggies.
Oh no, not positive. No. So Reed is such a hard one because an 80-minute Reed Mahoney should theoretically be a keeper. That's the thing. And obviously he averaged like 40 last year. It was just absolutely horrendous. And a lot of that was actually, it was all missed tackles is the problem. So we had a bit of a look at Reed. Obviously Reed had the highest missed tackle count last year of any player. And that was obviously a function of him being a hooker and playing the large majority of the games. So if you have a look at his demerits, 2019 was -10, 2020 -7, 2021 -6.5, and then he jumps over to the Dogs, and then it's -10, and then last year -15.4, which was just absolutely shocking. Massive amounts of missed tackles. It used to be sort of 1.8 missed tackles a game before he did his shoulder, and then came over the Dogs, and it was like 3 something in 2022, and then up to 5.5 last year. So, and towards the end of the year, it seems like it got worse. Obviously, you see 9, 9, and 10 in the last 3 rounds. It also could have just been an element of them sort of giving up a little bit. You see with Reed though, the attack is up. They're touching the ball, the kick meters are all up. So, theoretically, Reed's upside is somewhere near what he did in 2021, which is a 60 average player. But he's got to cut the demerits out. And the biggest way to do that is by the Bulldogs actually having middle forwards that aren't named Max King to support him defensively. Obviously, he was just getting run over last year. So, with the addition of Josh Curran, even Kurt Mann, who's going to be playing in the middle, they've got Knight there. Breakout Sam Hughes is apparently coming, and obviously Preston and Kickow do a great job. So I'm hoping that we can even just arrest some of that negatives and get it back to like even the 3. Because if all you have to do is get it back to 2022 numbers, and he goes back to 47 average, which is some value, but I'd like to see that. I'd like to see that sort of nudge 50, and it's definitely possible. Just obviously needs to get the demerits under control.
Yeah, for sure. I was going to give you another positive was obviously the bye schedule won't be playing Origin there, so 13-16 he's there, and really the main worry for us here is the volatility on him because of those negative stats. He has a 30 in his game, and we all know that yes, last year he started incredibly well, wasn't having as many missed tackles in those first 3 weeks, but it quickly jumped up from there. And as soon as you see those big missed tackle games is when you see the 30s and the 40. And if you're paying 580 is not a crazy amount of money, but if you're paying that for someone that's picking you up a 30 or 33, 2 to 3 weeks in a row, that just spells trade for most people, I think. So that is probably the biggest negative to Reed. He is very, very risky in terms he can come out and absolutely kill it for you, but he could come out and hit a bunch of 30s in a row and really leave you in the lurch and really behind, I suppose, when someone might go for a Brandon Smith at the 540 and he could come out and absolutely kill it as well. Again, he has that positive in him, or you could go for a Reece Robson or something who could also just be a bit of a bounce back type of player. So at 580, he's definitely a big risk on that.